Okay, so now we're going to begin with Halacha Taaruvot, Siman Tzadik Het, Shulchan Aruch Yore Deah. This Siman speaks about Din Isur Shenitarev Be'eter Ve'ofen Bitulo. What is the halacha when you have a forbidden mixture that is mixed with something which is permissible to eat? And how do we, if at all, cancel it out? Is it possible to be mevatel that Isur? In what way does the Isur become not a problem? It obviously presents a problem when it falls into the heter, and we wish to know, is there any way that that problem can disappear or resolved? So before I begin, I just want to give you a few points that are important to keep in mind, and that is the Mechaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, for the most part, brings down the final halacha concerning any matter based on three Rishonim, for the most part. And they are the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. So he bases himself on these great Rishonim. If there is a disagreement between some of them, then he goes by the majority. 2 out of 3. If there is no agreement between the three, or if there's no opinion, then he will add, in addition to these three, the opinions of the Ramban, the Ran, the Rashba, the Mordechai, and the Smag. It's very important that we keep this in mind, because when he formulates an opinion, we must remember that perhaps he's basing himself on one or more of those Rishonim. He's not just making it up. He's obviously has the support, very strong support, from one or more of these Rishonim. Even though there may be other shiurim and halakhot Taaruvot, even though you may have notes that you have acquired from other classes, no two classes, no two shiurim are the same. My method or my approach is going to be quite different than what you may have heard before, what you're used to. And even though you may have certain notes that you'd like to follow, I'm not going to go through those notes unless we do so at the very end when we try to review the points that are brought down in those notes. This is going to be more methodical in trying to figure out the root of the halacha, the problems that arise, and the various shitot as we deem them important or relevant to the halacha. Quick review of one of the points we made last week that will come up in this siman, in the first seif, is tam ke'ikar. We want to know about a flavor, a forbidden flavor. Does it pose the same problem as the ikar itself? The ikar ha'isur, we know, is an issue. It is forbidden to us to eat something which is not kosher. But what about the flavor? That particular forbidden food is no longer around, but the flavor is still there. Does that pose a problem? Apparently it does. Everybody pretty much agrees, almost everybody agrees, that flavor is a problem. The question is tam ke'ikar d'oraita or d'rabanan? Does the tam, the flavor that we are able to sense, to feel, is it forbidden by the Torah, or is it only forbidden by rabbinic decree? That is the key. That is the main idea behind these two very opposing shitot. They both agree that it's a problem. The question is whether it's the Rabbanan and the Oraita. What difference does it make? It will make a difference. Obviously, if something is midrabanan, it's not as strict as if it's min Torah. So we need to know, as we go along, as we learn the halachot, if something is asur midrabanan or midoraita. So tam ke'ikar is a machloket, and we've already gone through the machloket. But what we're going to say now is that the mechaber, Shulchan Aruch, the Bet Yosef, is of the opinion that tam ke'ikar is doraita. So we're going to have that in mind, his opinion, because that is what we're learning right now. And his opinion is that flavor is not only forbidden, it's forbidden by the Torah. Which means that if there's ever a safek, you know what he's going to say. Safek doraita lechumra. He's going to be strict about it. It's a safek doraita. All right, it's going to be a problem if it's a safek, but why don't we apply the rule of bitul? Even though we have not gotten to all forms of bitul yet, we've covered a little bit of it in the introduction. We're somewhat familiar that there is a concept called bitul berov. Bitul berov is very powerful. It means that certain forbidden mixtures can be cancelled out or diluted by the majority of that which is permissible. So if I have more kosher food than non-kosher food, the kosher food is the majority, then it should render the non-kosher food mutar by virtue of the rule of rov. So the question is, all right, flavor is forbidden, but why can't that flavor also be nullified by rov? Why do I need 60? Even though we've covered the idea of where 60 comes from, but why not just stick with rov? Rov is powerful. Rov is learned out from achrei rabim lehatot, which means that we go by the majority. In case of there's a court, there's a Sanhedrin, there's a Bet Din, there's various opinions. We go by the majority. That majority rule applies by Isurim too, as we will see. In Min Bemino, if it's Yavesh, they're dry, as the example I gave last week with hot dogs. There are quite a few examples of where we will apply the halacha of bitul berov. Then why not just get rid of this tam with rov? And the answer that Rishonim pretty much give, the explanation that is pretty much used to explain this idea of why tam, flavor, does not just go away with rov, is because it's still felt. Because we feel it, as long as you can feel the taste, the flavor of the isur, then it is as though I can identify it. I see it. And when you see an isur, if you could see it, you can't have it, you can't eat it. Even if you have 100 times the kosher produce, even though you have many, many times more that which is permissible. If I can see it, I can't have it, I can't eat it. So if I can feel the flavor, then it's not batel. That's the reason. Simple. However, even though I can feel it, it has to really be felt strong. If it's a tam kalush or halash, if it's a weak flavor, it will not do it. In order for the flavor that I'm saying tam ke'ikar is deoraita, for it to be asur, for it to pose a problem, it has to really, really be strong flavor. A weak flavor is not asur. How do I know that? Well, we have one example where a weak flavor doesn't do anything. For those of you who learned Basar b'chalav, there is a famous concept of nat bar nat. Noten tam, bar noten tam. A flavor that traveled twice, if we can call it that. You're cooking fish in a meat pot. And later on you want to have this fish with dairy. The typical example. Can you? It's going to be basar v'chalav. The flavor of the meat in the walls of the keli are eventually going to travel back to the fish. You're cooking it in that meat pot. So we say no. Nat bar nat is not asur. It's too weak. It has traveled twice. It has gone from the original meat into the walls of the vessel, of the pot, pan, and now it's going back into the fish. That flavor that is now being removed from the walls of the meat pot or pan, and is going to be in the fish, is too weak to pose a problem of basar v'chalav. There's still a difference between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, however, when it comes to the halacha, of whether I may eat that parve food, whether it's fish or rice. I want to have yogurt with it. I want to have a cup of milk with it. Can you or not? Ashkenazim say no. Sephardim say no big deal. But even the Ashkenazim, by the way, will allow you to have your glass of milk afterwards. Just don't have it together. So again, this is a flavor, it's weak. But this is only in Basar b'chalav because we're going to combine the two. That is when we say it's weak. When it comes to an isur, even nat bar nat is asur. Isur means if this pot is taref, they cooked pork in it, even then, even though it's not bar nat and it's weak, we're mahmir, we're strict with that little bit of flavor. Nevertheless, I gave you this example of nat bar nat just to show, to demonstrate that a very weak flavor is not really a flavor. Right, so that's why. That's why.
Render it permissible, even by isur,
well, depending on the circumstances. That is why it will depend on the situation that we're dealing with. We have these amounts, the amount of 60, for example, that is being used as an average, or for the most part, statistically strong enough percentage that it will dilute most flavors, right? But what if I can still feel it? That's where it will be a question of whether it's a problem or not. Because there are some flavors that are very strong. So it will depend on the circumstance. Is 60 enough? Usually yes, but maybe it's not. Do I really, really have to taste and maybe beyond 60? No. I'll let you know. Why is the answer Because we assume that even if there is, it's very, very weak. So there you have basically an answer to your question, that even though there is a little bit of a flavor, it's basically not a big flavor. It's not strong. It's not strong enough. But if you can taste it very much, maybe it's not weak. If it's a very weak flavor, then you're really, really going to have a hard time tasting. Yeah. But that's basically the idea here, that even though we're going to have a flavor, it has to be strong, it has to be felt. And another halacha that we will see later on, we will see it here too, but we will talk about it more later, is that the ta'am, the flavor, cannot be a ta'am pagum. It cannot be defective. Now what does that mean? Ta'am pagum could mean one or two things. Either this food is defective, and when I mix it with other food, it will make the whole mixture taste no good. This non-kosher food item will really ruin everything, right? Or it in itself is defective. It doesn't taste good. In other words, it doesn't have to be that the non-kosher food is defective. It could be that by combining it with the kosher food, it really messes everything up. It really destroys the whole flavor, ruins it. Or it could be that the isur itself, the nevela, the taref, in itself is so pagum that it doesn't taste good. Now it could still be edible. We're not talking about something which is totally not edible, not fit for human consumption. That's another area. That's even less of a problem. We're talking about something that is edible, but it's so defective. You don't want to have it. It's no good. It doesn't taste well. So here, when we're talking about tam keikar, we're talking about a tam that is felt. We're also talking about a tam that is not pagum. And that is what the Mechaber pretty much is going to cover as part of Seif Aleph in Siman Tzadik Chet, that there are some conditions as to, do I really have a problem or not? Because maybe it's not such a big deal. So let me go through the first Seif, read it inside, and then we'll see what we're talking about here. So the first Seif reads as follows: Isur shenitarev beheter, min b'she'eno mino. The Mechaber tells us that there are times it can happen that something forbidden will be mixed with something which is permissible. It could be in your kitchen, it could be anywhere. And it could be min b'she'eno mino, two different kinds of food. It doesn't have to be the same kinds of food. And of course, all of this is going to make a difference later on, whether it's the same or if it's not. But here, he's beginning with this example of a forbidden mixture that involves min b'she'eno mino. And what is the example of min b'she'eno mino? Kegon chelev shenitarev b'basar. Let's say you have non-kosher fat. Chelev. Remember, it's not shuman, the permissible fat. It's chelev that has to be removed when you're cutting up the cow, cutting up the sheep, preparing it, right? You want to salt it, you can't salt the meat with the fat. You're going to make the whole thing asur. So you have to be minaker the chelev. But somehow a little bit of chelev got mixed in with basar, kosher meat. So these are min b'she'eno mino. And of course we're talking about a pot, there's water, it's being cooked together. Yit'amenu ovet kochavim. One suggestion of figuring out if this will be a problem or not is let a non-Jewish cook or chef determine if there's a flavor there. Im omer, if he says she'en bo tam chelev, he does not taste the chelev, or she'omer sheyesh bo tam, there is, ela she'u pagum, it's defective, mutar, it's permissible. Vehu shelo yeh sofo le'ashbiach, even though we said it's pagum, as long as in the end it will not be a good flavor. Because it could happen that in the beginning something is defective, but later on, as the food grows, or as more time goes by, maybe it will become good. Maybe it will be restored to a more pleasant flavor. If that would be the case, then this halacha wouldn't apply. So as long as it's not sofo le'ashbiach, which is an halacha covered later on. V'tzarich shelo yeda shesomchim alav, the goy that we're relying on cannot know that we need his opinion to determine if this is mutar or asur, that his opinion is going to make a difference. He cannot know that. If there's no goy leta'amo, to taste it, then the other possibility is misharin b'shishim. You can calculate to see if there's 60. If there's 60 amounts of kosher food will cancel out the flavor of the non-kosher food.
Right?
Right. No, this is not basar b'chalav. The halachot are somewhat different in basar b'chalav. There we have other problems. We may have other problems. Chelev, not chalav. Here's chelev. Yeah. So if we don't have a goy, you can use 60. It's a formula. If there's not, we have to know how to figure that out. Is there 60 more of the kosher food to cancel out? And that's fine. V'chen imhu min b'minor. Let's say you don't have a situation of min b'she'eno mino. You actually have two items that are the same type. One is asur and one is mutar. Since kivan deleka lemeka mata'ama, since because they're the same min, you cannot ever feel the taste. They're the same. Hot dogs taste the same. They taste the same. How are you going to know it's a non-kosher? How are you going to know if there's ta'am here? They taste the same. Then you have no choice. You cannot use the goy to taste it. Misharim b'shishim. You need to calculate whether there's 60 times the flavor that was fell into the mixture. The Rama, Moshe Isserles, the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, says as follows: Today, we don't rely on a goy. We don't use this method of figuring out if something is still asur or it's batel. And for the most part, always misharin akol b'shishim. You will always figure out if there is 60 times. If you have the 60 times to cancel out, you're okay. If you don't, the whole thing is asur. You can't have it. That's pretty much the first seif. Now, this seif is pretty much a summary of a Gemara. The Gemara is a little bit more in detail, and the Tur actually quotes the Gemara verbatim. Here, the Mechaber uses his own words, uses his own example to discuss a particular problem, and offers two solutions out of the three that actually exist in the Gemara. But if you would learn the Tur, you will see that the Tur quotes pretty much the Gemara's three scenarios, not just two. All right? What are the three scenarios? That there are basically three ways of dealing with a situation of mixtures. One is by you yourself, a Jew, tasting it. Where could that be? You cannot taste something asur. If we're talking about a mixture that somewhat is mutar, like teruma, the Kohen can taste it. You see? The Kohen can taste if it's min b'she'eno mino. The Kohen will be able to taste if the teruma is giving flavor to the heter or not, to the cholin. So that one, of course, is not so relevant today. That's why he doesn't mention that. But that's one of the scenarios where you yourself, or a Jew actually, who's a Kohen, will be able to taste it. The second one, the second scenario, is mentioned by the Mechaber, involves a kapela or a kafela, depending how you pronounce it, a cook, a non-Jewish cook, who knows about cooking, he knows about flavors. He can identify something. He's an expert. He's not just an ordinary goy. Okay, so this is an important detail. He's not an ordinary goy. He knows something about food. He can easily identify something. He's an expert. And you'll see why I emphasize all these words in a moment. This kafela can be used sometimes, the Gemara says, if we're dealing with an isur. With an isur, you can taste it. Unfortunately, even tasting, as we will eventually see, just a little bit of a sip is asur. There's a question whether you can sometimes use your tongue without actually tasting with a spoon. Just the tongue. Is that tasting too? Is that also forbidden? So when it comes to tasting, we'll discuss it later on, when and how it is possible, if at all, for a Jew to do it. So kapela is the other one. A goy, which can be asked. The Gemara says in certain situations he may be asked to taste the isur. That's the Mechaber's first example. The third example is when you don't have a kapela. He's not around. You would like to have him taste it, but he's not around. You need 60. Or if it's The situation that the Mechaber brings, it's min bemino. They're asur, the same type, and then because you cannot figure out the flavor, because it's min bemino, then even if you had a kapela, he wouldn't be able to help you. Like chelev and shuman, min bemino. So these are the various scenarios that are brought down. What's the chidush? The chidush, the big chidush that the Mechaber is giving us at the very beginning of Halacha Taaruvot, a tremendous chidush. Bitul is not a chidush. Yeah, we learned that. We learned that from Basar. In Basar v'Chalab, we know it too. We've talked about bitul many, many times before we came to Halacha Taaruvot. I still need to learn about bitul. I still need to know how it works, but I understand it somewhat.
Does the Gemara there? We said three things.
The three scenarios, yeah. The three scenarios, sure. Shishim, yeah, shishim. So the big chidush of the Mechaber here, he's going to give us various chidushim here. Some of the words and some of the things he says steers up or brings about many questions on him, on the Mechaber. But one of the chidushim is something that we really, really need to analyze and we'll be spending most of the time tonight about. And that is, how do we trust the goy? Ne'emanut goy. This is a subject in itself. When can I trust a goy? Can I trust a goy? But wait a minute. I remember learning that a goy is pasul le'edut. He cannot be a witness. He cannot be your judge. We learned it out that he's pasul, that he's not qualified no matter how smart he is. Same thing with children. Same thing with those who are close relatives to you in certain situations. Women. There are various individuals who are pasul le'edut. And a goy is one of them. He cannot testify. And what are we asking him to do here? Is that what we're doing? Are we asking him to testify if something is kosher or not? Obviously it can't be, because we know he's pasul le'edut. So this is not testimony. And this is another very important point to keep in mind as we go along this first few things, that we're not dealing with testimony. Had we been dealing with testimony, there wouldn't be such a solution. Use a goy. It's obvious from many areas of Shulchan Aruch that whenever we need to use a goy, there's problems. Sometimes we can, but most of the times we can't. And what are those sometimes that we can? I'm going to go through a little bit and tell you why they are exceptions, but not the rule. The rule is I can't use a goy for testimony. But there are situations where it's not considered testimony. What is it considered here? The best description, as brought down by various Rishonim and Achronim, of what is going on over here or what is happening when I ask a goy for his opinion, all it will be is an opinion. In this case, a professional opinion. A professional opinion is called Gilui Milta. Gilui Milta means he is revealing to me something. He's not giving testimony about it. What's the difference? Testimony means I can only decide a situation based on him presenting me certain facts. The facts over here, I will be able to figure out sooner or later myself. Because if he tells me it's okay, I'm going to eat it, I'm going to drink it, and I'll be able to see it for myself if he was right or wrong. So is that testimony? When I can see it for myself? The goy here is not going to be telling me something brand new that I didn't know. He's going to be telling me something that I will also know on my own. But
maybe the point is that I'm capable. Could that help?
That too. But capable of it. Yeah, but here what will happen, and why it's important the way I'm saying it, is because since I will be able to figure this out on my own after he told me, he's not going to lie. He has no reason to lie. He knows I'm going to taste it. In other words, the rabbis tell us whenever something is a Gilui Milta, and whenever something will be known very, very soon, there's no incentive. There's no incentive for him to lie. That's an important idea. Because otherwise, so what if he's telling me, revealing to me a point? Why should I trust him? Because he has no incentive to lie. And since he has no incentive to lie, and it's not real testimony, in Isurim, in forbidden mixtures, and all kinds of Isurim, as we will soon see, whenever it's all it is a Gilui Milta, whether something is or not, and I will be able to figure it out sooner or later, there's no problem using a goy.
So, Milta. What
Yeah.
is the Milta?
Milta means the event, the word, the situation. the fact.
So the fact.
The fact.
He's reporting the fact.
He's reporting the fact.
Bringing testimony is reporting the fact.
He's reporting the fact, right.
Because it was very interesting what you said.
Yeah. Right. And there's different ways of saying that, and that's why I added that it's not only Gilui Milta. I also added that whenever it's a Gilui Milta, this goy, has no incentive to lie.
Is that why we can't tell why we're doing this?
Exactly. Otherwise, it loses a little bit the effectiveness of that. He may want to lie, he may want to look good. It has to be pure. Yeah. No, but I don't want to confuse the two, because what you've said really applies to a different concept called maslat or masech lefi tumo, where I don't want to tell him. Here, I am somewhat telling him what I want to know, okay? But I'm not going to tell him why I want to know. You see what I mean? Right. בצריך שלא ידע שסומכים עליו. So there's going to be a little bit of a difference between this and another concept that we'll talk about soon. Here he can't know why I need to know. But of course I'm going to ask him. I'm asking for an opinion, not for his testimony.
You suggest that it's not just that the goy, if he does lie, then the Jew, that's the shalom, he will eat it, he will know the truth.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But we haven't even gotten to the real idea of why this particular chef, not just a goy, why he won't lie.
But if I just
Yeah.
understand what you
All
just
right.
said, because
Right.
it seems to me that more or less separate were both one was what he is doing is not testimony.
This is not testimony.
Milta, it's not testimony.
It's not testimony, right?
And with respect to that, if I understand, what draws the border between is that he does not have an insight into act, but rather the person it is reported to
Right.
will himself be able to verify what he said, just reality-wise, Metzias-wise.
Right.
Regardless of halacha.
Yes.
But he has the ability
To verify.
Whereas if exclusive knowledge thing that I cannot
Verify.
verify,
Then it wouldn't
then
be.
it would be testimony and not Gilui.
Exactly.
So this is exactly the same border that
Yes.
I can verify turns the Milta,
Yes.
and that makes it possible for me to rely on him as a
Right.
goy. Now that I'm going to rely on him as a goy, I need to learn why I can.
Still rely on
I
him.
mean, formally,
Right.
I can now rely on a goy, but he could lie to me.
He can still lie.
Besides the
Right.
fact that I can rely on a goy.
Right.
So now I need another reason
Right.
why, after I am allowed to rely on a goy, I can indeed do so lemaisa.
Lemaisa, because
And that would be the second part that you said.
Yes.
I'm going to find him out anyway.
then there's no therefore
So
incentive
therefore
for him to
therefore
lie.
there's no point in lying to him.
Exactly. That's all part of the package of Gilui Milta. Now, listen to the following. This is not really such a big chidush, because we do find similar situations where an ed echad, one Jewish testimony, can be relied upon. Now, why is one ed a big deal? Because the Torah says you need at least two. Al pishnaim edim yakum davar. If you want to have testimony, for the most part you need two. However, we do find, as Rashi explains, we learn it out from various examples in the Torah, that the Torah relied on one ed, on one witness. For example, in Teruma, he took care of it. Shechita, he knows what he was doing. He was by himself there, right? Nikur gida nasher, nikur halev. You can trust him if he knows what he's talking about, and he's one. He's telling you, I did it. It's kosher. Or as Tosafot brings down, that we learn the whole thing from a woman who's a Niddah. She counts. Can we trust her? Of course, we better trust her. The husband has to trust her. She's one. Usually you need two. So what you find is in various examples, we are relying on one witness, even for testimony. One witness, the rabbis tell us, also has the power to be mechayev shevuah, to make somebody swear, even though he's only one witness and he can't really do anything, it's only one, but to make him swear he can. For tumat sota, that she's nitme'ah, that she became teme'ah, or for arifat eglah, right? Arifat eglah, eglah arufa, when we don't know who killed this victim, this individual. What if somebody does know that he was killed, right? So we would rely on that. There's no eglah arufa. So there are examples of where ed echad, one witness, is relied upon. Yeah. So the question is, is a goy the same as an Ed Echad? I mean, is that what we're trying to say? That there are situations that will rely on him? Or is it because of the circumstances, because of what he's doing, because of what he's saying, in certain situations only? And the reason I pose this question to you is because I will give you a few examples, not just this one that we have here, where we use a goy. Just like I gave you with Ed Echad, with one testimony.
He's also Ed Echad in addition to that.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And that is why I said this in some ways resembles an Ed Echad. But there's no comparison because an Ed Echad is Jewish. So the ne'emanut that we're questioning here, the trust, we give to the Jew and not to the non-Jew. The Pnei Yeshua says, however, that the reason why Ed Echad is therefore not believed anywhere else, even though we do believe him somewhere, is he explains because one witness lo medayek, one witness by himself will not be accurate. He will assume certain things. Assumptions and not being accurate are no good. You have to be accurate in reporting what you saw. So one witness by himself in other cases, unless they're the ones that I mentioned, will not be acceptable for one witness. That's what the Torah requires too. But somehow the goy also is able to offer his opinion because certain criteria is met. And I'll talk about that soon, what that criteria is. The Taz, when you learn the Siman, the Taz touches a little bit about this point of kafela, or the other concept that we'll talk about, Mesiach Lefi Tumo. And he says the word's a little bit different. He says that what is happening with the goy is that this is not a real testimony. All it is additional evidence. It's an additional piece of evidence that helps to build the case, to make a determination. So we all agree that this is not testimony. The question is how you define it, what the goy is doing. But he's not testifying.
It's curious because in secular law, the kind of evidence.
Right, but it's very, very strong evidence if it's testimony. Two people coming and saying, we actually saw, we know for a fact, Here, the goy, for us, it's an additional detail that can help us in this, in Isurim. I said so far in Isurim. In Isurim, where Gilui Milta is sufficient, the guy tells us, this is taref, this is kasher, right? Gilui Milta, he's revealing something to us, okay? He's not actually bringing about the whole case. One witness is enough. Ed echad ne'eman be'isurim, certain isurim. So with the goy, in a gilui milta, no incentive to lie, or as the Taz says, it's an additional piece of evidence that he's providing us, it will be okay, it will be acceptable. Okay, now that we have the concept of what the goy is doing by providing us information, how it's not testimony, we will see how this fits into kafela in the words of the Mechaber. The opinion that is brought down in the Gemara, that in this kind of a situation where you have min b'she'eno mino, that you let a kafela taste, does not involve necessarily Mesiach Lefi Tumo. Mesiach Lefi Tumo is another concept where a goy is saying something on his own voluntarily without being interrogated. Oh, by the way, when I was over there last week, this is what I've observed, this is what I saw. Nobody asked him. He on his own offered, volunteered the information. That's called Masiach Lefi Tumo. Voluntarily giving information without interrogation. Kafela here is not Masiach Lefi Tumo. It's very clear that we're going to be asking him for his opinion. And in Kafela there is an additional explanation brought down by various Rishonim that the reason we trust him is because lo mar'e cheskate o manuto. He does not want to give himself and his career a bad reputation. He's a chef. He's an expert. Remember I said expert? He therefore not only does not have an incentive to lie, that's a different idea. That's an ordinary goy. Here, we have something else. Kafela, not a goy. We have a kafela. He does not want to ruin his reputation. He's being relied on. If it turns out that he was wrong, what are you talking about? You don't know you know how to taste. There are tasters, whether it's in coffee or wine, they get paid a lot of money to be good tasters. So he doesn't want to ruin his reputation. And because of that, he has more ne'emanut than a regular goy, than a regular edut situation, which we can't use. Here we could use it because we have this additional detail. This individual does not want to ruin his reputation. What if he was not a kafela? What if he was an ordinary goy? Do we trust him or not? We see in some cases we do trust. A goy can be trusted if he's Masiach Lefi Tumo, if he volunteers information on his own. Why? Because the concept of Masiach Lefi Tumo says as follows. If a goy volunteers information and there's no incentive for him, he's just doing it on his own, diburo dibur emet. That is indicative that what he's saying is truth. Or at least it's more likely that what he's saying is accurate. He's not just making up a story. Now, this is a big chidush because for the most part we're not going to use a goy. When are we going to use Mesiach Lefi Tumo? We said it's not edut. We will have to, or we will be able to use Mesiach Lefi Tumo in certain situations. One of the ones that is the most famous one, that is brought down by, of course, many Sefarim, is what the Gemara says. We need it for edut Isha. The guy says, I saw her husband was killed. I was with him in the army, in Vietnam. This is important, critical information. Otherwise, she will be an aguna.
It's testimony already.
Huh?
In such a case,
No, it's still not testimony. Yeah, but right, and so therefore,
It's testimony.
yeah. I thought you were going to say something else. Not only is it no, it's okay. Not only is it edut isha, we're talking about erva. We're talking about something in the Torah. This is not something so simple. So the Gemara therefore specifically tells us about this one. This one they should never have allowed. This is not just a regular isur. Why were they lenient to allow a goy's information b'mesir lefi tumo for edut isha? It's a takana for agunot. They did not want to make it too difficult. As it is, it's difficult to find some simanim, something that we can go by, whether this man is still alive or not, whether she can remarry or not. That is the only one that the Gemara says, that's the only one that they officially allowed. If Beisurei Torah. En goy mesiach lefi tumo ne'eman, Beisurei Torah, ela be'edut isha. Only edut isha. That's basically the Ma'amar Chazal. Why? Because of the takana the Chazal made.
So this is an extreme case.
Yes. It's a takana. It should not have been allowed. We don't allow it. But wait a minute. Why not allow it? It's not edut. It's not edut. We just said it's a gilui milta, right? They're eventually going to be able to find out. And by the way, with that, we also have to say that eventually we can figure it out. We're going to find, there may be some evidence.
If he shows up, we found out.
Not only that, we may find his body, or if he shows up, so the goy is going to be stuck. Wait a minute. And there have been cases where people swear, I saw him dead. I saw him going into the gas chamber. Yeah, but guess what? The gas never came down in the gas chamber. You can never be 100% sure unless you actually see him dead. There have been all kinds of stories. So over there by a goy also, it is in conjunction, it's still a gilui milta of sorts, that eventually it can be found out. It's not that nobody's going to ever know. It's completely up to him. Otherwise, we wouldn't trust him.
That's the case. It could be found out.
Yeah, not necessarily. So, with testimony, we don't know of it. We don't have a problem to begin with. What's testimony? You're talking about, you're right. There are situations where testimony, we're aware of a problem, we may be able to figure it out too. But testimony is even stronger than that. Two people can come and say, and initiate a problem on their own. And we will rely on them. We didn't know the problem existed. And we will completely accept what they have to say. It's a big problem if the two are wicked and they're saying something not true. We have a problem. If they're kosher witnesses, we have to believe what they say. So anyway, what's the Masiach Lefi Tumo? Masiach Lefi Tumo is different than Kafela in that we need to trust him. How do we trust him? Masiach Lefi Tumo is sufficient because he's volunteering information in certain situations. That will be a degree of trust. The fact that he's Masiach Lefi Tumo. If we ask him and interrogate him, it's not possible. But if he volunteers it, it's a certain degree of trust that can be used in certain situations. Okay, now that we know a little bit about Goy giving information on his own volunteering or being asked and not wanting to ruin his reputation, the real question is on the Mechaber. we have a big question on the Mechaber himself, Rabbi Yosef Karo. Because, what is he saying over here? He's saying, It'ameno oved kochavim. He's not using the word kafela. We say that kafela would be good. We know that from the Gemara. Being a chef, he's concerned about his reputation, right? Here he says, Sarich shelo yida shesomchim alav. Okay, what does this fit? This fits Mesiach lefi tumo. So what's the question here in the Mechaber? Mechaber somehow, from somewhere, we don't know yet from where, right? He introduced or inserted in this halacha that one way of solving this problem is using abbreviation, maslat, Mesiach lefi tumo. You want to determine if this food is kosher or not? If a goy comes on his own, basically you don't tell him what it's for, it's also like on his own, and you ask him, can you taste it? He says, it's fine, I don't taste anything strange with it. You can rely on it. Who said that? Where is maslat? I didn't see maslat in the Gemara. I saw kafela in the Gemara. The second question in the Mechaber is, all right, maslat, you took it from somewhere, fine. Why don't you mention that another possibility is kafela, the real thing? Use a chef, use a goy, like the Gemara says, right? Why doesn't he mention kafela? Now, I'm not the only one who asked the question, neither are you. The question is asked by others as well, including, I think, the Gra asked the question as to, why didn't he mention kafela? A goy should taste it. A regular goy here doesn't say kafela, it means a Mesiach lefi tumo. Okay? So I'm going to give you the answer to the first question first, and the second question as to why kafela is not mentioned at the very, very end, because you will understand from everything else the answer to that question too. The first question is, where does he get Mesiach lefi tumo? The second question is, why doesn't he say kafela here? I understand the halacha right now. There is a way of using a goy. I understand why. It's not edut. I understand how it works approximately. Okay? Alright, fine. So far, so good. But where did you take Mesiach lefi tumo in this case? Where do you take it? What's the source of this? How come here, yes, and not everywhere else? Okay? And why don't you mention kafela like the Gemara says? Alright, let's go to the source. Let's see what it says there, what Tosfot says there, so we can figure out where the Mechaber got his halacha from. It's a big chidush. Remember, Mesiach lefi tumo is a bigger chidush than kafela, as we will see. It is a bigger chidush to rely on a goy who's not a chef. So where did he get this halacha? So if you go to the source, the Gemara, you will find that Rashi explains that you need actually the two of them. Rashi says, he uses the words, you need kafela, he's a chef, and he should be Mesiach lefi tumo. Rashi, yeah. Now, why does Rashi say that you need both? I mean, Rashi is very clear, he says both. In other words, he cannot know what he's doing this for, and he needs to be a kafela. Why does Rashi need both? There is a machloket, there's various opinions to try to explain Rashi. Some say that Rashi says both, because when it comes to tasting, you need an expert. You need an expert who knows how to taste food. You just can't use an ordinary goy. That is why he says you need a kafela. Why do you need Mesiach lefi tumo? Because that's the only way to trust the goy. Okay? The other opinion says, no, the reason Rashi says you need both is because in this case, Mesiach lefi tumo by itself is not enough. But the rabbis tell us a chidush, that if you have a kafela and Mesiach lefi tumo, stronger reason to be able to rely on him. He's a chef. He's also Mesiach lefi tumo. Okay?
The chef, according to this opinion, doesn't go taste, but it goes on trustworthy.
Untrustworthy, exactly.
So he's got a reputation to lose, and he's just talking stuff.
Exactly.
It's not going to be he's talking stuff and lose his reputation.
That's exactly so. You need a strong foundation to trust this goy. And you have it if you have the two, according to Rashi. Or you need an expert taster and Mesiach lefi tumo.
A world of different. The two comments.
They can be different. Yes, they can be different. Now this is Rashi. Tosfot doesn't talk about Mesiach lefi tumo. Tosfot basically says, you have the kapela. Kapela doesn't want to ruin his reputation. That's all he talks about. No mention of Mesiach lefi tumo. At least for sure not by itself. And the main reason why we trust him is he doesn't want to ruin his reputation. This guy knows what he's talking about. He's probably going to give us the information we need. It's not testimony, remember? Nobody ever said it was testimony. But it appears like testimony. Here, for this kind of situation, we can rely on this detail that we just learned. A goy does not want to ruin his reputation. See, we will be able to rely on that to be able to figure something like this out.
Then why do we need
That's what we're trying to find out. Oh no, Rashi? No, I told you why. Rashi seems to say that we need both. Tosfot doesn't say we need both. He just sticks to what the Gemara says, kafela. Rashba says, now remember what I told you in the very beginning? What did I tell you in the very beginning? Who does the Mechaber look at? Who does he learn? Right? And what
sometimes
the other ones, okay? So keep that in mind. Who he's going to look at, who does he consider in his decisions. What does the Rashba say? Rashba says in reality, kafela, Mesiach lefi tumo, either one is fine. Why does it say kafela? It's just, we're talking about food, we're talking about tasting. There is such a concept, Mesiach lefi tumo, in Chazal, in many situations. In here, if we're going to use a goy, it could be either one. It doesn't have to be both a kafela and Mesiach lefi tumo. Now, in the very, very end, the Rashba's word does that he's of the opinion that you really should have both, to be mahmir. The chumrah. But it says in reality they're the same. They're very similar at least, and either one is fine. Well, if that's the case, I'm already picking up where the Mechaber was seeing or thinking of using this term. The Rashba says it's either or. Rashba, right? What about the Rambam? Rambam is also someone that the Mechaber looks at. Rambam is very interesting. The Rambam says, you have this problem of this mixture, call a goy. Doesn't say the word Mesiach lefi tumo, doesn't use the word kafela, nothing of that sort. The Rambam doesn't use either. No term kafela, no Mesiach lefi tumo. He's not going against the Gemara either because he's basically saying the same idea. You're allowed to use a goy. The Gemara was descriptive, and the Rishonim explained to us why there may be an importance to kafela. Rambam says nothing to do with that. In this kind of a case, you can rely on a goy. Just ask him, what does he say? And the question is, all right, Rambam, wait a minute. Mesiach lefi tumo, I began to understand Gilui Milta. He doesn't have an incentive to lie. It's volunteered information. It's not real testimony. I also understand Tosfot, and I understand all the ones who hold that kafela is important because he doesn't want to ruin his reputation, and that adds some credibility to what he says. But why would the Rambam trust a goy if there's no Mesiach lefi tumo? So the Pri Megadim explains another concept that we see in Yore Deah elsewhere. There's something called mirtat. He's afraid. He's afraid to lie. And the Gaon of Vilna, I think, explains it this way too. Why would the Rambam say something like that? There are times a goy may be afraid, especially if he works for you. Now, afraid is different than ruining his reputation, because ruining only applies to a chef and a cook, that idea. Mesiach lefi tumo is a real Mesiach lefi tumo. This is not a real Mesiach lefi tumo. The Rambam says, go ahead and ask a goy. So what could be the reason why you could rely on him if he's afraid? And apparently the Rambam was talking about a situation where a goy is afraid to lie. A very important idea. Otherwise, why would you rely on him? The Ran says similar to Tosfot, but he adds something very interesting. I saw that the Ran adds, when you use the kapela, you want to make sure it's not Mesiach lefi tumo. It's not. It better not be. He better know exactly what's in store for him. Because when will he be concerned about his reputation? When he knows that his opinion makes a difference. So the Ran adds this idea, yes, of course he's concerned about his opinion, but you better make sure that it's not at all Mesiach lefi tumo. Not like Rashi. He should know what the consequences of his opinion will mean.
So then you should tell him what.
Yes.
You should tell, so not like he shouldn't know.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. In some ways, yeah. That's what he should know the consequences. Yes, he should know the consequences of, because that's when we can apply the reasoning of Tosfot that he doesn't want to ruin his reputation. When he knows the consequences of what he will say will make a difference. And I think the Ra'ah and the Ritva also go along with the Ran. How about the Rosh? There's various opinions as to what the Rosh holds. It's very unclear whether he requires both or one. In reading the Bet Yosef, my observation is that the Rosh would also say one is enough. But some say that they find that the Rosh would require both. I'm not convinced. I mean, not from reading the Bet Yosef. From the Bet Yosef, it appears that the Rosh would also approve that one is fine. Yeah, if you're in the Bet Yosef, it appears to be like that. Yeah. Okay, so now that we've gone through all the Shittot, what does the Bet Yosef himself say in the Bet Yosef, not in the Shulchan Aruch? What does it say in the Bet Yosef, which is a commentary on the Tur? There it appears like this. He pretty much, the Bet Yosef agrees, goes along with the opinion of Tosfot and the Rashba, that you don't really need a kapela Masiach lefi tumo. You don't need both. You just need a kapela, which is the opinion of the Tosfot and the Rashba too. Kapela is kapela. You don't need a kapela Masiach lefi tumo. But this Bet Yosef also relies on the Rambam. He says so clearly. He said, and we can also rely on the Rambam, who therefore says that Masiach lefi tumo is must speak. So what do we see from the Bet Yosef? From the Bet Yosef, we get a clear understanding. And by the way, the Gra says that too, pretty much in different words. Just look at the Bet Yosef, you'll have an answer as to what's going on in the Mechaber here. In the Bet Yosef, it's clear that he follows that reasoning, that all you need is either kafela, and you may also rely on a Mesiach lefi tumo, which is similar to what the Rambam says. Now, what's interesting is that for those of you who learned Basar b'chalav, you will have noticed that in Basar b'chalav, in Halacha Basar b'chalav, this question already came up, where a goy is being asked to taste if there's meat in the milk. It's also over there, it says Oved Kochavim. Right? It doesn't say Masiach lefi tumo. Real quickly, Siman Tzadik Bet. Those of you who want to look it up.
No, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. סימן צדיק ב' סעיף א' כזית בשר שנפל לתוך יורה של חלב, so we have some meat falling into a pot of milk or lasagna, anything dairy. רותח, it's boiling. טועם העובד כוכבים, הגדרה. You can taste the pot, you can taste the dish. אם אמר שיש בה טעם בשר אסורה, if he feels that there's some טעם בשר, it's אסור, אם לאו מותרת, אפילו פחות מ-60. Even if it's less than 60, which is another idea that we'll cover maybe on Thursday. What happens if he tastes, there's no flavor, and it's less than 60? You need to have 60. Anyway, that's already a different area of halacha that we'll want to cover separately. But we see that the Mechaber basically uses that pretty much freely. Use a goy, but not always. But at least in Basar v'chalav, in Taaruvot, somehow he uses it. Okay, so what's the problem? The problem is, even though we already know where the Mechaber is taking his halacha from, he's definitely relying on Rambam, Rashba, and so forth, we still have a problem with Mesiach lefi tumo. Kafela, I understood already a little bit better, but Mesiach lefi tumo, I have a problem because usually we would not use it in halacha, except as I said before, edut isha. How come we're using it here? What's different about here? If you ever get a chance to Bezat Hashem learn Hilchot Melicha, Hilchot Yain Nesech, there are various other halachot in Yore Deah, Chelik Bet, where you will find that sometimes we do use a goy Mesiach lefi tumo. So this is not the only exception. In Melicha, there's an interesting question. Siman Samach Tet, for those who want to look it up, it's an important halacha that will help understand what's going on here too. In Melicha, Siman Samach Tet, maybe I should read it for you. If you haven't read Melicha yet, Melicha means to salt the meat. You need to extract the blood. Even though it's not dam hanefesh, that we said last week is karet, is midirabanan, but it's still blood. You got to take it out of the meat, unless you want to roast it, on an open fire where you don't need to salt it. So salting is an important part of preparing meat to make it kasher. Now, once you finish salting it, you want to rinse the piece of meat. You don't want to cook that meat with the salt and maybe containing some of the blood in the salt. You want to rinse the salt out. That's a very important part of the process of salting, is rinsing it off. Okay, so the halacha here discusses as follows. What happens? Oved kochavim meshamesh bebet Yisrael v'natan al basar b'kdera. You have a cook, you have a helper in the house, a maid, and he put the meat into the pot. You've lit the fire. If you're a Sephardi, you put the pot on the fire. So there's no problem with bishul hakum here. But he put the meat into the pot, then you don't know if you washed it out or not, if you rinsed it. Im yodea oved kochavim minhag Yisrael, if he knows the custom of the Jews, This is what we always do. He's used to it. Somchim al devarav. You can rely on his words. Im hayasham Yisrael yotzeh v'nichnas. On condition that there was another Jew who would go in and out of the kitchen from time to time. Oshum katan ben dato. There was a little young boy there, a young girl who has some dat. So what do we see here? You need two things. You need, of course, we rely on him, but do we rely on him blindly? No. He has to have known Minhag Israel. Okay? He has to have known that this is the tradition. And there is somebody going in and out. Okay? So what's this? This going in and out is that criteria that I was mentioning before. Fear. We need that extra fear there. Just knowing the Minhag Israel, okay, it's important, but it won't be enough. There has to be Yotzeh V'Nichnas. Does anybody here remember where else Yotzeh V'Nichnas is important? That you have a goy going in and out?
No.
What? I'm sorry, you have a Jew going in and out? Chalav Akum, Chalav Israel, right? We have a problem with milk that was milked by a goy. Maybe he mixed camel's milk, pig's milk, non-kosher milk. Even though it's rare, it's not too common today, it doesn't pay, it's expensive. But that was the concern of the Chachamim, and therefore in order for it to be 100% kosher milk, it needs to be observed. You need to observe the milk, or to go in and out.
You might get caught.
Exactly. So what's this going in and out? This going in and out is an alternative to kafela. Kafela, we have, the criteria is he's concerned with reputation. Here he's afraid. Here he's afraid to lie. You see, we have to have something to basically trust this goy. We can't just leave him alone. We can't just take what he says for granted, take his word for it, right? So there needs to be something in addition to just him saying what he's saying that I should rely, because otherwise I can't accept what he says. So we have Yotzeh V'Nichnas, we have the concept of mirtat, that he's afraid for whatever reason, he's concerned about his reputation. That is why we see that in all these kind of situations where this is the criteria, this is the factor, it would be permissible. And by the way, Yotzeh V'Nichnas and mirtat is much stronger than Masiach Lefi Tumo. It's much stronger, more of a reason to trust than just plain Masiach Lefi Tumo. Okay, now according to the Shach over there in Halakhot Melicha says, wait a minute, Yotzeh V'Nichnas, fine, that makes sense, he's afraid. But the Shach says, why didn't the Mechaber just say Masiach Lefi Tumo? Why does he need, if Mechaber holds on Masiach Lefi Tumo in other situations, why didn't he just say Masiach Lefi Tumo here as he has in other places? So the Shach gives two answers. One is that he holds, the Mechaber holds that here it's not enough, Masiach Lefi Tumo, you need mirtat. That's one explanation. Here you actually need that he's afraid. Masiach Lefi Tumo is not enough. The second reason is because in the Bet Yosef himself asks a question. Bet Yosef says that Masiach Lefi Tumo bedoraita does not help. That's the halacha. In areas of Isurim that are deoraita, Masiach Lefi Tumo does not have, except for Edut Isha. Remember that? So how come it's helpful in all these other situations that we have? Because they are midrabanan. Huh? No, we don't have. Yeah. It's a different situation. So anyway, in Isurim B'Derabanan it would be permissible. In Isurim Doraita it would not be permissible. For example, there's the area of Echsher Kelim. The Shach says in Echsher Kelim, the Mechaber was Machmir. The Echsher Kelim there is, can you buy pots from or other pans and pots from a goy that was used for yain? But he says that there's two situations there. One is that he says they're brand new. They're brand new kelim. The goy says that. And if they're brand new kelim, you can rely on him if they look brand new. That's okay. Otherwise, he could have used them for taref. Okay? But if they look brand new and he says brand new, you can rely on him. The other situation with yain nesech, we use for wine, he says, I made them kasher. Over there, we don't rely on him. Why not? Because over there's already an isur that we know he was using it before. And since there's already a hazakah that he was using it before, we can't rely on him now to say it's kasher. Just a few more examples. So the Shach brings this down, and he says, just like we see that the Mechaber was Mahmir over there, in Mesiach Lefi Tumo, apparently even in the Rabbanan, because it is the Rabbanan over there, he would be Mahmir too. And that is why in Ilchot Melicha he didn't mention Mesiach Lefi Tumo. So the Shach is trying to explain why the Mechaber did not use Mesiach Lefi Tumo in Ilchot Melicha, even though it's the Rabbanan. Okay, that's the Shach. But the Ramah doesn't appear to agree with it. The Ramah says, you know why the Mechaber would agree with Mesiach Lefi Tumo here too? Yeah, the Ramah pretty much would say that. Yeah, you know why he would agree with the Smak that with that either Mirtat or Mesiach Lefi Tumo. He chose this as an example of where you can rely on a goy, but even Mesiach Lefi Tumo would be okay. The reason why here it's better than Echsher Kelim, where he's Mahmir, is because here we have the additional idea that a goy likes to keep the kitchen clean. He's makpid on cleanliness, and because of that, he wouldn't throw the piece of meat with all the salt into the pot. See, so the Ramah seems to say that even here the Mechaber would agree Mesiach Lefi Tumo is okay, even though he was Mahmir elsewhere, even though it's Midrabanan there too. Here we have additional reasons why he would accept Mesiach Lefi Tumo. And by the way, from the Bet Yosef is mashma that when you have Yotzeh Nichnas, you don't need anything more. And Yotzeh Nichnas is sufficient by itself. You don't have to ask him anything. The fact that there is a Yotzeh Nichnas is sufficient, that we don't think that the Goy would do anything different. Yotzeh Nichnas is therefore very powerful when you need to make sure if something was done right. Okay, now that we've got a little bit of an exposure of the various places where Mesiach Lefi Tumo is used and for the various reasons, I had a question, and I had this question before I read the entire Shach and Taz. It turns out that the Shach and Taz somewhat discuss it too. I said, okay, Mesiach Lefi Tumo can be used in Isurei Derabanan and not in Isurei Doraita. I have an idea. Is it possible that if I can use a Mesiach Lefi Tumo here, will depend on the machloket of Tam Ke'ikar? Maybe according to those who hold Tam Ke'ikar is Midrabanan, that is why I can rely on Mesiach Lefi Tumo. Interesting, no? And according to those who, of course, hold it's Midoraita, that is why they don't say or mention Mesiach Lefi Tumo. You got to go into Kafela, you got to, right? And of course, it turns out that they discuss it. It's discussed already. I wasn't the first one to figure out what. Yeah. Apparently, yes, it can be. It can be proposed as such. The problem is with the Mechaber once again, because the Mechaber holds Tam Ke'ikar Deoraita. So even if you were to say that Mesiach Lefi Tumo is okay because we're talking about Isurei Derabanan, and Isurei Derabanan we find various situations where you can, because of Mirta, because of all the reasons, but only Isurei Derabanan. But here, according to the Mechaber, it's an Isur Doraita. Why would the Mechaber agree to use Mesiach Lefi Tumo?
Especially when Hamilton rejects it, even by...
Yes, in some cases, yeah, right. Yeah.
I know that Basar is the rice.
Right.
And the Chaber holds.
Right.
I thought, I'm just trying with regard to Shari Surim,
Right.
He holds with Shari Surim.
That's correct.
So I would have thought that might have meant that he holds Tam Ke'ikar Basar. In other words,
Yeah, you're right. That's a very good point that you mentioned. But while we're here, we're asking the question on even something Deoraita, where he would hold Tam Ke'ikar.
We have isn't the Mechaber
Expressly.
Tam Ke'ikar is the right? Or how do we know that?
No, we understand that from what he wrote, that that he's strict with it, and from the Bet Yosef. Yeah, that he would hold that it's an Isur Doraita. Sure.
So it's the rice even Surim, which would be Chelev and...
Yeah, the Hanan is a different idea.
Yeah, different idea, but I would have thought because you didn't... Okay.
Yeah, but it's a good question, yeah, and that's why I presented the example of Basar B'chalav too, where it would be a Deoraita. For Hanan and for Tam Ke'ikar too, in a sense. So the question would be on the Mechaber as far as Tam Ke'ikar is, not so much Hanan, because here this is not the problem of Hanan yet. Yeah, sure.
But Hanan would even have, if something melts and becomes liquid.
According to the Ramah, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the mechaber, even if it's itself, does he hold Hanan?
No,
No.
it doesn't seem to be holding Hanan. No.
So mechaber would not hold Hanan when we're not saying Tam is ke'ikar, when the ikar itself is involved.
Yeah, that's the other shita, whether it's ikar and mamasho, if it's ta'amo and mamasho.
Right. When legabe
Yeah.
Hanan,
Right.
the mechaber would even not hold Hanan b'shar isurim shoot.
Yeah, it's only a chidush in Basar v'chalav according to him, and those that hold in that shita, that it doesn't apply everywhere else. It's a big chidush Hanan. Yeah, it wouldn't make a difference. Yeah, it's a different concept. Yeah. Yeah, it's a different concept somewhat. Yeah. Different idea, yeah. But anyway, so that's the question would be in the mechaber. If this has something to do with tam keikar, it would be difficult as far as what the mechaber is concerned. So what does the Shach have to say about that? The Shach, of course, this question is not a new question. The Shach says here, ika lemeka maleda milsa, you would therefore rely on masech lefitumo even on deoraita, because you can figure it out, you can find out. It's going to eventually, you're going to be able to figure it out on your own, know it on your own. He will be therefore concerned. He will not want to lie. And that is why you're right. In here, the Mechaber would also agree, even though it's in Doraita. That's the general opinion as to why the Mechaber would agree to use Mesiah Lefitumo, even in the Doraita over here, because it's you're not Eidos, you're able to figure it out. The Shach says it very, very simple. That's the only answer you can give. This is something that we're able to figure it out, we'll be able to know. He will not. He'll be afraid to lie, and because of that, this is an exception.
And it only helps us because we're
Yeah, right. And the Tas says similar, right? That the Gilui Milsa, the Tas says, allows for a very weak form of credibility called Mesiach Lefitumo. But the Shach says, the Tas, and anyway says we have to be machmer anyway because it's a doraita. So the Tas says, in principle, the reason why this helps is because we allow for the credibility of Mesiach Lefitumo, because of Gilui Milta. So going back to the original point, we said it's not real testimony. Okay, now we're going back to one of our other questions that we left unanswered. We've explained why he didn't include it here. Mesiach right? I mean, why he used Mesiach Lefitumo. We know where he took it from. It's also an option. But why not say kafela? Because we can infer. If Mesiach Lefitumo is acceptable, the more so kafela. Because the reason for kafela is even a stronger reason. Reason for kafela is not so much for being an expert, as some other opinions would want to say that he knows how to taste it, is because of ne'emanos. Ne'emanos by kafela is stronger than a Mesiach Lefitumo. Because he doesn't want to ruin his reputation, because of who he is, that concept of kafela will be stronger and more reliable than Mesiach Lefitumo. So if you say Mesiach Lefitumo, then you don't have to say kafela. You understand? Kafela will be stronger, more reliable than a Mesiach Lefitumo, exactly. Just want to finish that there are some that say that anything that can be found out later, that you can figure it out later, is even better than Eid Echad, than one witness. We said before that one witness can be relied upon in certain situations. The Gilui Milsa, or Avid Legiluye, is even stronger than Eid Echad, because people usually don't lie in those kind of situations. And as I said before, whereas with Eid Echad, the Pnei Yeshua explains, the reason why we don't always accept one Eid is because he's not always medakdek. He's not accurate. He's not always careful to give real accurate testimony.
Isn't that also
Where?
He's not going by imagining things in some reality because he's got a guy standing next to him. He'll say, but that's not what happened. So he's afraid also to.
If you have that kind of a situation, yes,
yeah.
Right. Also with Isurin, if you have Isurin, we do accept relatives. We do accept those who may be pasul eidus because of Gilui Milsa. If it's a Gilui Milsa, it's not real testimony. So those that are not qualified to be witnesses would be acceptable here. And last but not least, I saw something in the run that I don't remember if he actually gives a clear answer, but he asks what would happen in a situation where we don't hear all the details from the goy if we ask him all kinds of questions. If asking questions back and forth would do away with the whole advantage of Mesiach Lefitumo. An interview, an interrogation, versus a real typical classical Mesiach Lefitumo arriving on his own and telling us, or just giving him one question. So the Ran has this discussion of whether would that qualify as Mesilah Fitumo, or is it because there's so many questions and interrogation that it loses a little bit its effectiveness? Because then it's not a real Mesilah Fitumo. And this could make a difference, as we will see B'ezrat Hashem, after we cover a few halachot. We're going to use real examples, real life examples that happen every day in the kitchen or elsewhere. How would we go about resolving them? What would be the halacha in these things? And sometimes you may need to investigate, you may need to interrogate. Would that qualify still as a Mesilah Fitumo? Or does it really have to be very simple, as the Mechaber points out, as long as he doesn't know? Do we really have to keep it very, very low key? Otherwise it loses the, because maybe he may have other things that he may want to say, and maybe may add more, and may not be so trustworthy or as reliable than if we were to just ask him out of the blue, catch him by surprise. So the Ran discusses that. How would it be if you really ask him? Can you ask him many, many more questions to be able to figure it out? So anyway, this is the first seif, and of course we do have quite a bit more to cover, which will include the other types of mixtures, min b'mino, and if it's yavesh, or if it's lach, if it's liquid, or if it's solids, and whether it's enough to have a kefela, or do you need 60 as well? And what if you still feel the flavor? What if you don't feel? What if he says there's no flavor and it's less than 60? I think we'll leave that for Thursday.